Thank you very much indeed, Mayor Daley. As you know, I'm not a Chicagoan myself, at least I'm a Chicagoan by immigration rather than by birth. But I think of you not so much as a Chicagoan, but as an Irishman who emigrated. One of the questions, when I arrived in Chicago 13 years ago, my good friend, Father Andrew Greeley, took me on a tour of Chicago. And what struck me most about it was that he didn't take me to the places he described were neighborhoods. So he said, now we're in Bridgeport, now we're in Hyde Park, now we're... and it struck me that Chicago is made up of this mosaic of really tight neighborhoods that people associated with. And I think your own reputation is as someone deeply committed to your own local place. We relate to that in Ireland. That's how we think. What struck me as extraordinary is how, starting from this very narrow focus, you seem to be global in your outlook. And I wondered, how did this come about, that rather than close in, as many cities and neighborhoods did, you decided it was better to open out?
Well, when you think of the history of Chicago was founded by immigrants from the beginning all the way today. So we always have a huge influx of immigrants into our city. And of course, changing immigrants every 20 years, and we see it today. And so we're really a global city with global participation. In order to take advantage of that, we had to really reach out to the rest of the world to realize that the world is getting smaller. And it will because of technology at a faster rate. We can see it even today in the Middle East. So how things change so quickly. And I think all of us had the vision in this room and others in the city that in order to survive this century, you had to be a global city. If not, you'll live in the past and you just fail. And that's what's happening, will happen, unfortunately, to many cities. You need a global presence. And if you don't have a global presence, then there's not much future to those cities.
So do you think that in the future there will be a set of super cities that will be connected to each other?
Right. If you look at the urbanization in China and Africa, in the Middle East, and you can see it in South America, you can see it in India, millions and millions of people are moving rapidly, much at a faster rate than U.S. U.S. had a much more slower time in moving people from rural areas into cities. This is happening so rapidly in these countries that's changing their dynamics of these countries in the government and business. And so there's going to be huge urbanization. And we can describe it here in Chicago. It goes all the way from Milwaukee all the way out down to Peoria. It goes all the way over to Indiana. So we're becoming of a region, not just a city. And that's what's happening in much of the world, but at a faster rate than we've ever seen in the history of cities.
So I think this is a very important point that you make, and it strikes me that in Chicago, so you're mayor of Chicago, but Chicago is no longer a city on its own. It's a city that's embedded in an urban area that's much bigger. Now, you've worked a lot with leaders of other communities that surround the city. In 20 years' time or 30 years' time, do you think this would be a single unit, or do you think it's going to remain a patchwork of...
Well, that's hard to predict, but what has happened, what we've organized, usually the politics kept us apart. The city is mostly Democrat, suburban area, Collier County is mostly Republican. Some way, everybody fought those issues. And then we realized we're being taken advantage of by other people in Springfield or Washington. So what we said as mayors in forming this caucus, let's all come together and let's work together. And there are some issues we cannot agree on, let's set those aside. And now the Metropolitan Mayor Caucus, we include mayors all the way from Peoria, Rockford, and I've always said if some business wants to move into Chicago and they can't fit their business here, I'd rather have them stay in Illinois. And when I first got elected in 1989, I remember Sears was making a decision to relocate their offices out of the city of Chicago and out of the state of Illinois. And North Carolina was bidding heavily in other cities. And I supported their relocation here in the metropolitan area for one reason: they were staying in Illinois. And that was very important for us, you know, in keeping them here in Illinois.
The other thing of the many things I like about Chicago is the thriving creative community in Chicago. And when you started or encouraged the Broadway in Chicago initiative, I must say I wasn't optimistic about it. What made you think it would be? It turned out to be a good idea. What made you think it would, and many people thought it wouldn't?
Well, I've always believed that if you take a city like ours with immigrants and younger people coming in with the universities and what we've established over years, that cultural institutions will describe in the future what a city is. Sometimes we in government think, or business, we're going to describe it because of our names or what positions we held or how much money we have. But I believe that artists will describe our city in the future continually, and that's why it was important, through the help of Maggie and others, to realize that cultural institutions, and not just the larger ones, but the smaller ones in communities, have to have opportunities to thrive, and that's why we bring artists as much as we can to live in Chicago and thrive in Chicago. To me, that is the essence of a city. That will really make our city a much better city in the future.
And is your ambition eventually that there should be Chicago on Broadway instead of Broadway in Chicago?
Right. We hold our own.
The mayor has very kindly agreed to take questions from the audience, so if people have questions, if a person has a question, if they would raise a hand, and a microphone will...
Also, on the cultural institutions, so many small theaters in our communities, it's amazing. I mean, you have just a storefront of 30, 40 people participating on a Friday or Saturday night. And so I think that's what it's all about. That's what you have to really encourage and allow them to beginning and grow in our city.
Well, no, I agree entirely. I mean, Chicago always had a very strong local theater. But
yes.
I guess my question was, did you feel that having this Broadway presence was also necessary? Or?
Yes, it was an opportunity to bring some of the shows from New York as they move across, make it one destination. We're competing directly with Toronto. Toronto had a long-standing theater, and we have replaced that. People from around the country will come here to our theaters along Randolph Street and State Street. They'll come here, which is really important for us to establish. And we took a lot of theater goers that went to Toronto and other cities in Chicago.
It's a strong Irish tradition, of course, theater. So I will leave it to the people in the hall to get the mic. If you would stand up, perhaps.
Yeah. Mayor Daley, hi. What is the one thing that you wish you could have done but didn't get done or didn't get finished?
Well, I think I wish I would have done a much better job in education, in the sense that the urgency and you realize that if you give a good quality education to a child, you get independence for life. If you don't give an education, they're dependent upon government and everyone else, and that's the failure of society. And so I wish, it's very complex, the education system. It's too complex for maybe America, and we have to end that complexity. If we don't, we lose more and more of our younger people in the education system, not only the city, but throughout America. And there's a lot of conversation, a lot of talk. We have more research. We've done more studies than any other nation in this education reform. And I think now we have to make some real tough decisions. If we don't, then we'll fail another generation of younger people. And that is unacceptable in this great country. I think we should not be failing children. And that learning environment, the getting the home and getting the churches and the community and the not-for-profits and everybody involved, make it a learning environment. And to me, that's what we have to do as a city, to make learning is the highest priority in someone's family. Even though their parents don't have an education, that some way we have mentors over their students, over their children, that we can mentor them, that education is not just through elementary and high school when you graduate, but throughout your whole life.
Mayor, one of the things you said when you were speaking was that Chicago should encourage recruitment of teachers from other countries. I'm a third-generation teacher myself, so I believe in teaching. Why is it that there aren't locally produced teachers, and what can be done about that?
Well, if you look at the whole hemisphere, all the way from Canada all the way down to the hemisphere, the Americas, we don't produce math and science. In the Second World War, how did we get the space program going? Russians and Germans, we brought across during and after the Second World War in the 50s. We brought them in. Mm-hmm. And America's always been a country bringing in, and now we're a country of pushing out. And so you have to bring math and science teachers. We bring teachers across from China. We're recruiting teachers in Eastern Europe and the Middle East who speak English in math and science. And China realizes that too. And we have to really you can't wait to produce a teacher in so many years. You can't just have a program, a 6-week program, and say, now you're a math and science teacher. It has to be part of our curriculum. It has to be part of the whole curriculum of the school, that math and science is part of our culture, and that's hard. That's what we lack. And in the rest of the world, China will expand it. If more and more teachers speak English, they'll bring them, or Spanish or Portuguese, they will bring them across all throughout, the great opportunities. And that's why I give our students opportunities in math and science and another language. They'll have an opportunity to teach. And so it is a problem for America, and we still have restrictions of bringing teachers in, allowing students who have been educated here to stay here. This country is turning our back on the past, and we welcome people from around the world, and now we're turning our backs on them, which is really unfortunate. I just spoke at one of the classes at business school, and half the class are from around the world, and unfortunately, they can't stay here. I don't know why, and it's part of the problem. The federal government, State Department, Homeland Security, some way we think they're all risk. I don't know why. You know, they've been to our wonderful schools, and we have to change that policy. But when you get to the federal government, everybody's pointing fingers, and wait, why can't we just change this policy? They're not threats. They're not terrorists. They're not threats to our country. They will benefit not only our country, but the world. And recently I was in Morocco and met a former ambassador from Morocco to the United States. His daughter cannot, after graduating from London School of Economics, she would love to work in America, but she can't. And that is unacceptable.
And is this why you've now got the whole of the federal administration run by Chicago people?
Yes, we're working very hard at them. They don't like to receive my phone calls. He's on the other end, you know what he's talking about. No, but I stay on the different points, but I think the Homeland Security and State Department, I think the Secretary of State has to take is the highest priority, and education. All 3 departments should come together and say, these students are not terrorists, they're not a threat to our country. They have to do that, but there's unfortunately, everybody's pointing fingers.
This is on, I'm Mike Egan, I'm a member of the Harris Dean's Council. First of all, this is, I guess, we're on the eve of the conclusion of the second consulship of the Daley Gents. If we use a Roman analogy, it's absolutely what it is. And thank you, and Mrs. Daley, for your contributions, particularly in the arts. I'm a past president of Goodman Theater, and when we started with Stan Freeling in 1972, it was a children's theater. It wasn't equity, it was student productions, and some stage plays, but we had 2,200 subscribers. Today there are about 22,000 subscribers, and there were 3 or 4 producing theaters in Chicago. Today there are over 200 in the metropolitan area. I think that's a quantum leap, and I think it's only come about because of the support of the city and the community. We have more vibrant theater here in Chicago than they do in New York.
Yeah.
I, many years ago at a Goodman board meeting, said, you know, when I go to the airport and go to New York, I walk onto the ramp and I see all these signs to go and see this Broadway show and that Broadway show. I want to get in an airplane to New York and see signs on the flight into Chicago saying, come and see these shows here in Chicago.
And your question, Mike?
It's a good idea, I like that.
No, it's all good stuff. The question is, going forward, I hope you and Mrs. Daley remain active in the support of the arts in the city. It's going to be very important. Will you do that?
Yes, we will.
Definitely,
that's a great, I love this idea of putting ads in the airports, call Mike Bloomberg, try to get some space there as quickly as possible. That's a good suggestion, not only there, but as you know, I'll be traveling to China very shortly to really promote Chicago as an economic center and a tourism. That the gateway to America will be Chicago, the friendliest city Chinese city in America is Chicago. And so really make them more comfortable to come to the United States and to make their entry point to Chicago, both for business and for tourism. And we'll establish with World Business Chicago and business leaders and others to really focus on that in China. And we have good good partnerships since President Hu was in the city, that we have good energy there. And they feel welcome because we're a city of immigrants. So we welcome immigrants in, and we don't think they're strangers. So and that's very important for the tourists, especially the business. We think this should be their business center for America.
Morning. I'm Carol Adams, the Supple Museum. We hear lots of times people sort of decry government getting too big, but at the same time, we hear our citizens being somewhat threatened by increased privatization. How do we get the appropriate balance there?
Well, I think there will always be a balance because we have to reinvent. What we did in the last century is unacceptable in this century. We can't live in the past, and many times government lives in the past, and so we have to change. If we don't, take Groupon, take UPS, take all these various companies that have grown in the last 15, 20, 30 years have changed, and if government doesn't change, it lives in the past. And so you can't do the same policies that the last century did in government. And so we have to reinvent government. It's not just cutting government. It's not just, okay, we're saving money. How do we reinvent it? I have found out that the non-for-profit and the business community can help us tremendously on that. So we talk about privatization. It's really not privatization. It's basically provide services in a much better way. Like here in Chicago Housing Authority, all of our services are provided by the non-for-profit sector. We have contracts with them. Government doesn't employ people to do it. We go out in the community. You're the best in this program, in job training. You're the best in rebuilding the lives of ex-offenders. You're the best in dealing with single mothers. So they go out and work with the community to get the best non-for-profits in the community working with them, instead of just hiring government employees and say, well, you do it between 5 days a week and you can't do it at night and on weekends. So government has to be more flexible, and the way more flexible is bringing the non-for-profit organizations into government, working in a much more flexible schedule. Because the services cannot be provided between 5 days a week, between 9 and 5. That's unacceptable, citizens.
So do you think that the housing transformation in Chicago has been a success, and how would you like it to be in 10 years' time?
Well, when you look at you have to read the study of it. The Chicago Housing Authority, in 1959, Senator Paul Douglas and my father went to Washington, D.C., part of a congressional record, to the Senate, and argue you cannot build high-rises for the influx of people from rural areas. You cannot take people from rural areas, mostly African Americans coming in. You cannot do that. You put them in high-rises, it's completely different from because they have larger families, they have strong religious ties, they have extended families. And so this will be a tragedy. Of course, the federal government, in their wisdom, usually do that. They went the opposite. And they started building high-rises all over America because they said it was cheaper, it was easier, and it was a much better way. But in the long run, it ended the opportunities for people to move out of public housing. Prior to that, it was built for veterans of the Korean and the Second World War. And prior to that, some of it was built during the Depression in parts of the city in America. And so today, every mayor from Paris, Sao Paulo are coming here. What are we going to do with, they got hundreds of thousands, millions of people living in high-rises. When I visited Paris, gangs, guns, and drugs, school, the same issues that we have. And so if you look at the influx, it was mostly African-American at the time, the 60s went to high-rises. Then the government said, you cannot work, we have to take the poorest of the poor. So those who moved in were working. But they had poor people waiting on lists, so they had to tell all these people to leave. So the poor are the poor. Then you have to be the poorest, you can't work. And secondly, and if you're married, you cannot get benefits. And so all of a sudden you made a class of single mothers by federal policies, well-intentioned, then you made a class of unemployed people. And that's what it became. And of course, in the 90s, about 70% of it was mostly vacant and empty. And for years, under Democrats and Republicans, I said, you have vacant buildings, what are you going to do with them? Well, they're part of our portfolio, we can't deal with them. Until, to be very frank, when Bill Clinton was elected, and at the end of his career, I went to see him and I said, Mr. President, I've been mayor since 1989. I can drive down the street, I look to the right, isn't this beautiful? When I look to the it's federal housing, it's Chicago Housing Authority. We have to do something as a city and as a nation. Otherwise, they're not going to improve because of their federal policies. I would like to have responsibility. And most people, again, said I lost my mind because after I took the schools in '95, they said, that's it, end of your political career. You're never going to move forward because that is the issue that no one can deal with. Stay away from it. Then when I came to this issue in '99, they said, well, you're not going to do well because this is going to be very controversial. Bill Clinton gave me the opportunity to take over the Chicago Housing Authority. I met with all the leaders, came into my office, and they all came in, about 20 leaders, mostly women, about 99% women. And they said, Mr. Mayor, everybody's lied to us. Everybody says our lives are going to change, my children's or my grandchildren's. Nothing's changed. And I said, if we don't change, I'm not trying to maybe help you now, but I'm trying to help your grandchildren right now or the next generation. Because if we don't do this, it's failure again. And I'll be very frank, all of them signed on. And that doesn't mean we had difficulties up and down. In the end, in rebuilding their lives with housing for single mothers with children, grandmothers raising grandchildren, seniors, homeless, school housing for foster children. So you really have to break up the population you're dealing with. And I really believe we have success because I have mayors, to be very frank, even from China, South America, Sao Paulo, all over in Europe coming here to realize what they can do with public housing. And I believe we're on the right track in rebuilding public housing, and not just building a house, rebuilding their soul and their mind and their body. It isn't just giving someone a house, you're rebuilding the person. And that, to me, that is our mission. And then you have to remember, Bill Clinton left and President Bush comes in. I was praying because I thought that maybe he doesn't understand. I remember I had an appointment to go to the White House, and I met with him. And he said, what is your highest priority besides education? You've been talking about education for a half hour. And he said, what is it? I said, I need assistance from the HUD secretary that you appointed and in regards to public housing. He said, what are you going to do with it? I said, Mr. President, we want to rebuild their souls, their mind and their soul and their body. It isn't just building a building and saying, okay, move in there. We want to be able to bring services to them. We want to rebuild their lives and their children and grandchildren. He said, I'm on board. Now, elected Republican, and for 8 years, he kept that course. Not one opportunity did he say because of political reasons or other reasons. Remember, all the people in most public housing, 100% voted unanimously against them. Not against him, but for somebody, I should say. But he kept the course. From my viewpoint, a lot of people said to me, why would you even mention his name? You know, you have to give him credit. And he stayed the course of 2 or 3 secretaries in regards to our transformation of public housing. They could have left us at any time, but they stayed the course. And even today, the course is moving forward.
Good morning, Mayor. My name is Ernie Sanders, and I represent the Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation. My question to you is about healthcare disparities. They're prevalent in inner city communities, and typically the supply doesn't match the demand. There aren't enough healthcare providers for the patients who exist in the communities. And with the Obamacare being ruled unconstitutional in some aspects, I'm just wondering, what can we do here in the inner city to contribute to the health and well-being of our citizens?
Well, I think number one is the restoration of Cook County Hospital into the healthcare system and have them in the county looking at it. And then in turn, all the different facilities that we have to be able to cooperate with the county system. But also, if you go through all the communities, we have more clinics, for-profit clinics appearing in the city. It's amazing. I mean, you go up and down streets, and you'll see all these various clinics. These are run privately, and they make an enormous amount of money off the federal government. And I've argued that discussed this with the federal government, is that you're proliferating more and more of these for-profit clinics in all of our communities, especially in the poor communities, because they rely off of federal fundings. We have to be able to coordinate this. We shouldn't have 25 private clinics over here. And what is happening to people, why can't we provide full services for them? And I think the Obamacare started the discussion, okay, and that's what the discussion will be. I think as they move forward so quickly, I think there was a lack of education in America about the change. People felt, you're moving, but do we understand it? You know, the first step, the second and third step. I think they have to get back in educating people how important health care is to all of our communities. It can't just be for a few, it has to be for all of us. And so I hope now that we can realign ourselves with the federal government coming into communities. An example is the Cook County healthcare system. I think that is the plan, and I think if we keep working on that, that will help us tremendously provide the health care for people and bringing our school systems into the healthcare system as well.
Mayor, there's one question I'd like to ask you before we finish. When we moved to Chicago, we moved to the Hyde Park neighborhood and discovered quite quickly, this is in the south side of Chicago, and therefore there was only one baseball team that we were allowed to support, and we are proud supporters of the White Sox. My question to you is, what is the greatest public sacrifice you've made as mayor besides wearing a Cubs cap in public?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, it's a tough question. But I think as a city, I think there are always difficult decisions to be made, and not just dealing with sports. I think America is just, we look at sports figures as idols, and we shouldn't do that. It's just, I think we're really making a mistake. I mean, everybody enjoys sports, but there has to be more than that in our society that we should be proud of. And I think the University of Chicago and our theaters and our cultural institutions and business leaders that give back, we have to elevate them in a way that it's equal maybe to sports. And I'm a great sports fan. You know, I love basketball, baseball, football, hockey. But I think we have to do that in our society and spend a little more time concerning about the less fortunate and giving back into the communities.
Mayor Daley, on behalf of the Hart School and the University of Chicago, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Colm.
Wonderful.
Appreciate it.